Washington State has sunk more bridges than most states have built. 3 of the structures in this video are currently on the bottoms of bodies of water. One collapsed in 1940 and is now a protected archaeological site on the floor of Puget Sound. One sank during a windstorm in 1979 and was rebuilt. One went down on Thanksgiving Day 1990 because a contractor left access holes in the pontoons unsealed over a holiday weekend. And the contractor's vehicles are still on the deck, 12 feet below the surface of Lake Washington. This is not a list of beautiful bridges. It is a list of bridges that were useful, then abandoned, bypassed, collapsed, sold for $1, or offered to anyone who would take them for free. From the Columbia River scablands of central Washington to a glacial fjord on the Kitsap Peninsula to a dairy county most people in Washington have never heard of. 16 structures the state built and mostly stopped thinking about. 1. Lacey Murrow Memorial Bridge. Original 1940 span, Lake Washington, King County. There is a bridge on the bottom of Lake Washington. It has been there since 1990. It is 6,620 feet long, reinforced concrete, and it sank on Thanksgiving Day while the renovation crew was home for the holiday. It cost $35 million to renovate. The renovation is what killed it. Conceived in 1921 by engineer Homer Hadley, colleagues called it Hadley's Folly. Civic organizations predicted a chain of scows the city would regret. Built anyway, opened July 2nd, 1940, the first concrete pontoon bridge ever built and the largest floating structure in the world at the time. 22 hollow pontoons, 6,620 feet of roadway, championed by State Highways Director Lacey V. Murrow, whose brother, Edward R. Murrow, was at that moment becoming the most famous radio journalist in America. Homer Hadley was asked to stay in the background. In 1989, a parallel span opened alongside it, named the Homer M. Hadley Memorial Bridge, and belated recognition of the man everyone had mocked for 2 decades. The Murrow span was closed for renovation. The contractor stored contaminated wastewater inside the hollow pontoons and cut access holes into the pontoon tops that were not properly sealed before the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. November 25th, 1990, windstorm, pontoons filled, pumps arrived too late. One pontoon sank and dragged the rest down. All cabled together, no way to decouple under load. A 2,790-foot section went to the bottom with several contractor vehicles on the deck. WSDOT sued for $69 million, settled for $20 million. The state's own report, the principles of good marine practice, were not a specific contract requirement, nor were they followed. Kiro Radio won an Edward R. Murrow Award for covering it, the only time the award has connected both Murrow brothers to the same event. The rebuilt bridge reopened September 1993. The original concrete is still on the lake bottom. Homer Hadley died in 1967, the year the bridge was renamed for the man who took credit for it. The bridge named after Hadley is standing. The one named after someone else is at the bottom of a lake. 2. Hood Canal, floating bridge, original western half, Kitsap/Jefferson County. Hood Canal is not a canal, it is a glacial fjord, 55 miles long, subject to ocean tides and winds that funnel straight down its length. In 1961, Washington built the world's first floating bridge in a saltwater tidal basin across it. Engineers were warned this was borderline reckless. The bridge carried SR 104 between the Kitsap and Jefferson peninsulas. 23 hollow concrete pontoons, each weighing 5,000 tons, bolted together and held by 42 anchors weighing over 500 tons each. At the center, a retractable drawspan for Navy submarines. During construction, 2 pontoons sank during fabrication. The bridge opened on time regardless. On February 13, 1979, a weather pattern called a lee-low evacuated air from western Washington and channeled winds straight down Hood Canal. By 6 in the morning, gusts exceeded 100 miles per hour. At 7:15, the western section, 13 pontoons, each 360 feet long, broke loose, rolled, and sank. A truck driver named Red Taylor had backed his rig off the bridge minutes before. The WSDOT employee Chuck Myers lost his 1967 Plymouth, parked on one of the pontoons. It was never recovered. The Olympic Peninsula was cut off for 3.5 years. The rebuilt western half opened October 1982 with heavier anchors. The bridge now closes automatically at 40 miles per hour. The storm that sank it was over 100. The original pontoons remain on the bottom. Chuck Myers' Plymouth has never been found. 3. Galloping Gertie. First Tacoma Narrows Bridge, Pierce County. The original Tacoma Narrows Bridge opened July 1st, 1940. It was already moving when it opened. Workers called it Galloping Gertie because the deck rolled in the wind and made them seasick. Some chewed lemons. The state opened it anyway, charged a toll, and let people drive across it for entertainment. Designed by Leon Moiseef, who had worked on the Golden Gate Bridge. Washington's own engineer had proposed a stiffer design. The federal PWA found it too expensive and pushed the state toward Moiseef's cheaper, shallower alternative. Third longest suspension span in the world at opening. A University of Washington professor was hired to fix the oscillations. He installed shock absorbers and tie-down cables. Neither worked. On November 1st, 1940, one of the tie-down cables snapped in high wind. 6 days later, winds of 42 miles per hour. A cable band slipped at mid-span, the deck shifted from galloping into a corkscrew twist, and a reporter named Leonard Coatsworth crawled to the towers on his hands and knees, leaving behind a cocker spaniel named Tubby. Tubby was never recovered. At 11:10 that morning, the center span dropped into Puget Sound. The film of the collapse is still shown in structural engineering courses. Leon Moiseef's career ended with the bridge. The deck is on the bottom of Puget Sound, listed on the National Register of Historic Places since 1992 to prevent salvage. Wind tunnel testing became mandatory for all federally funded bridges as a direct result. The bridge was 140 days old. 4. Beverly Railroad Bridge, Columbia River, Grant/Caditas County. There is a railroad bridge spanning the Columbia River near Beverly in the Scablands of central Washington. The Milwaukee Road built it in 1909. The Milwaukee Road went bankrupt in 1977. The bridge sat closed for 42 years, splitting a 300-mile hiking trail in half, and forcing anyone on it to detour onto Interstate 90, which has no shoulder and no pedestrian walkway. Concrete piers 85 feet above the Columbia, 14 Warren deck truss spans, 1 Parker through truss, roughly half a mile of steel. In the 1920s, the railroad electrified the line and added catenary masts to the bridge deck. In 1972, the catenary was removed. The masts were left standing. The Milwaukee Road was surrounded on all sides by the 1970 Burlington Northern merger and had nowhere to go. It abandoned its Pacific extension in 1980. Washington State took the bridge in lieu of back taxes. A $5.5 million renovation followed. 1 construction worker died during rehabilitation. The bridge reopened in April 2022 as a pedestrian and cycling crossing. The catenary masts are still on the deck 50 years after the last electric train because nobody ever decided to take them down. 5. Dungeness River Railroad Bridge, Sequim, Clallam County. The last surviving timber howl through Truss Railroad Bridge in Washington State is in a city park near Sequim. The last train crossed it in March 1985. Built in 1915 by a Milwaukee Road subsidiary to haul Olympic Peninsula timber to ports. Main truss span, 156 feet. Timber trestle approach, 580 feet. Total, the longest bridge on the Dungeness River. The Howe Truss, patented in 1840, timber compression and iron tension, was the workhorse of American railroad construction for half a century before steel replaced it everywhere. Service abandoned 1985. The Washington State Audubon Society purchased the surrounding property in 1995 and created Railroad Bridge Park. Volunteers have maintained the bridge since 1992. You can walk out onto the span and look at the river through the timber deck planks. There is no sign explaining it is the last bridge of its kind in the state. 6. Vance Creek Bridge, Mason County. The second highest railroad arch ever built in the United States is on private timber company land in Mason County. You are not allowed to go near it. It is 347 feet above Vance Creek, taller than the Space Needle's observation deck. Built in 1929 to haul logs, operated for 50 years, abandoned, became an Instagram destination, and partially burned by an arsonist in 2025. Built by the American Bridge Company for Simpson Logging. Arch span 422 feet. Total length 827 feet. Cantilever construction over the gorge because it was too deep for conventional scaffolding. 12 miles away on the same line, the high steel bridge was being built simultaneously. Slightly taller, same company, also 1929. 2 world record railroad arches on the same rail line in the same county. Decommissioned in the 1970s. A 2013 attempt to convert it to a tourist attraction collapsed when insurance requirements could not be met. The bridge went viral on Instagram around 2013, attracting hikers who dangled from the beams. Green Diamond Resource Company added fencing. On July 31st, 2025, arson damaged the remaining wooden deck elements. All access is currently prohibited. The steel arch is intact. Green Diamond has announced no plans. 7. W.T. Clark Pipeline Bridge, Wenatchee, Chelan County. In 1908, the first highway bridge to cross the Columbia River south of Canada was built outside Wenatchee. In 1950, it was replaced. The state sold it to the local irrigation district for $1. The irrigation district kept it because the bridge had been carrying their water pipes since 1908 and still needed to. Built for W.T. Clark, one of the builders of the Wenatchee Highline Canal, a gravity system bringing water to the arid plateau above East Wenatchee, making apple orchards possible. The bridge carried two 4-foot diameter iron irrigation pipes alongside the vehicle roadway from its first day. A bridge and an aqueduct simultaneously, replaced for vehicle traffic in 1950. The Reclamation District bought it for $1, relocated the pipes inside the truss lines, and reopened it to pedestrians. For 73 years, it was called the Black Bridge. In October 2023, 115 years after construction, it was officially named the W.T. Clark Pipeline Bridge. The pipes still carry water to East Wenatchee Orchard 6, dry months per year. The district paid $1 in 1950 and has been running water through it ever since. 8. South Park Bridge, original 1931 span. Seattle, Duwamish Waterway, King County on June 30th, 2010 at 7:56 in the evening. The South Park Bridge raised its two leaves for the last time, and they were never lowered again. Opened March the 21st, 1931. A Scherzer roll-and lift double leaf bascule. Leaves that rock backward on a curved rocker rather than pivot on a fixed pin. The only bridge of this type ever built in Washington state. Over 20,000 vehicles a day at peak, connecting a working class neighborhood of 4,000 residents to the rest of Seattle. Its design lifespan was 75 years. That lifespan arrived in 2006. By 2007, cracking piers, misaligning leaves, corroding steel, severe seismic vulnerability. No feasible repair option. A $99 million replacement grant was rejected. The bridge closed June 30th. South Park was cut off. 3-mile detour each way, 4 years, $440,000 per year in maintenance for a bridge that was no longer operating. Multiple advocacy reports noted the funding timeline was affected by the demographics of the neighborhood, predominantly Latino, lower income. A replacement grant came through in October 2010. The new bridge opened exactly 4 years later. Salvaged mechanical parts from the 1931 structure became public artwork at the site. The only Scherzer rolling lift bascule ever built in Washington is gone. 9. Murray Morgan Bridge, Tacoma, Theophos Waterway, Pierce County, Murray Morgan was the most important Pacific Northwest historian of his generation. He wrote Skid Row, The Essential History of Seattle, during quiet shifts in the 1940s and 1950s, while working as the bridge tend on the 11th Street drawbridge in Tacoma. The bridge was renamed in his honor in 1997. 9 years later, a structural inspection found it deficient. Opened February 15, 1913. Designed by Waddell and Harrington, the country's leading vertical lift bridge engineers, built on a 4% grade, believed to be the first graded vertical lift bridge in the United States. For decades, the only non-rail crossing between downtown Tacoma and its port. The 2007 I-35W collapse in Minneapolis prompted WSDOT to inspect Washington's inventory. Murray Morgan was found structurally deficient and closed October 23rd. Demolition, $27 million. New bridge, $105 million. Rehabilitation, $35 million. The city chose a rehabilitation. During the closure, thieves broke into the mechanical room and stole the control panel wiring. Reopened February 1st, 2013. Painted black, its original 1913 color. 4 lanes down to 2. Bike lanes, pedestrian walkway, elevator to the waterway below. The city saved it for $35 million rather than demolishing it for $27 million. Not every bridge gets the math done in its favor. 10. Barstow Bridge, Kettle River, Stevens/Ferry County line. In 1947, Stevens and Ferry counties in northeastern Washington bought a prefabricated steel bridge from the Federal War Assets Administration, a Pratt Pony truss designed for battlefield deployment in Europe, to be shipped in pieces and assembled quickly over bombed-out river crossings. They bought it for minimal cost and used it for 63 years. The Kettle River crossing at Barstow had been destroyed by flooding in 1947. The surplus truss was 125 feet long, slightly too short. A 58-foot steel deck beam spanned with wood plank balustrades was added to close the gap. One-lane bridge, half World War II battlefield equipment, half improvised extension installed on a reused abutment, built on a design patented in 1844. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1995. One of very few World War II military surplus bridges still in public road service in the United States. The listing didn't prevent demolition. The bridge was offered for sale, no buyer was found, removed and replaced in 2010. The town of Barstow still exists. Nobody put up a sign. A county bought a battlefield bridge for next to nothing and got 63 years out of it. That is either excellent government purchasing or evidence they needed a better bridge for 63 years. Probably both. 11. Grays River Covered Bridge, Wahkiakum County, Washington State, has one covered bridge still carrying a public highway. It is in Wahkiakum County, and the second least populated county in the state, 11 miles up a river valley on a road called Covered Bridge Road. Most people in Washington have never heard of Grays River. The bridge has been there since 1905, built by the Grays River Grange at a cost of $2,615 to let dairy farmers cross the river before their perishable products spoiled. Designed as a howl-through truss, left uncovered for 3 years until the county noticed the timber was rotting in the rain and put a roof on it in 1908. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places November 23, 1971. By 1987, dry rot and a 1986 flood had reduced the load limit below 5 tons. Too light for the farm trucks it was built for. With Washington's centennial approaching in 1989, Wahkiakum County chose rehabilitation over demolition. The rebuilt bridge, same howl truss design, salvaged original hardware, was rededicated September 30th, 1989. Cost $295,980. It still carries one lane of vehicle traffic. The Grays River Grange still manages it and holds an annual covered bridge festival each summer. The bridge has been maintained by the same community for 120 years, and most people in Washington have never heard of it. 12. Puyallup River Bridge, SR 167 Meridian Street Bridge. Puyallup Pierce County WSDOT offered to give this bridge away with $1 million attached. 2 separate campaigns years apart. Nobody took it. The bridge, which engineers determine may be structurally unique in North America, is currently being demolished. Built in 1925, lowest of 10 bids at $77,200, completed in time for the Western Washington State Fair. A riveted steel warren through truss 371 feet long. Engineers studying it before decommissioning found no other bridge of identical structural configuration in North America or, as far as they could determine, anywhere in the world. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2014. WSDOT decommissioned it in 2015. The offer, bridge plus $1 million. Buyer covers moving costs and lead paint remediation. No takers. As WSDOT noted, the requirements effectively eliminated most potential buyers before the conversation started. A small section will be salvaged as a heritage marker on the future Puyallup Trail near the SR 167 interchange. The rest is becoming rubble as part of the SR 167 Gateway project. That is what happens to a one-of-a-kind bridge in a state that has a lot of bridges and not enough money to keep them all. 13. Deception Pass, Bridge Island / Skagit County 20. Million people cross Deception Pass Bridge every year, and almost none of them know about the morning the center span was 3 inches too long. Advocates had lobbied for the bridge since the 1890s. The 1929 bridge bill was vetoed by the governor, partly due to lobbying by a ferry operator named Bert Olsen, a Norwegian immigrant who had operated hourly crossings at Deception Pass since 1924 and is believed to be the first woman to hold a ferry captain's license in Washington. She got one veto. The bridge was eventually funded through the federal PWA and built in 12 months, August 1934 to July 1935. CCC workers jackhammered and dynamited 3,300 cubic yards of basalt for the pier foundations. Water for the concrete was piped in 6,000 feet from Cranberry Lake. When the final center span was barged in and lowered into place on a hot July day in 1935, it was 3 inches too long. Steel expanded in the heat. Engineer Paul Jarvis calculated that a 30-degree temperature Drop would shrink it exactly 3 inches. The crew came back before dawn, worked by floodlights, and at 4 in the morning the temperature had dropped and the span fit. Dedication, July 31st, 1935. 5,000 people attended. The governor arrived late. 700 cars crossed that first day. Berta Olson's ferry service ended the same day. Nobody put up a sign about her either. 14. Puyallup Avenue Bridge, now Fishing Wars Memorial Bridge. Tacoma/Fife, Pierce County. The bridge that completed the final Washington link of the Pacific Highway opened January 8, 1927. 2,833 feet of steel over the Puyallup River tie flats. 3 different truss types across 5 spans. Governor Hartley drove through a satin ribbon. The Pacific Highway ran border to border, and this was its last missing piece in Washington. The 3 river spans were Pennsylvania Petit trusses, a Pratt variation with a parabolic top chord, each built at an unusual skew that engineers have noted is uncommon, across the state's entire truss bridge inventory. The 2 approach spans were a Baltimore truss and a Warren truss, built by Grant Smith and Company of Seattle. I-5 opened through Tacoma in December 1960 and took most of the through traffic. The bridge continued carrying roughly 16,000 vehicles a day to the port until age caught up with it. The main truss spans over the river were replaced in 2015. The bridge was renamed on May 21, 2019, the Fishing Wars Memorial Bridge, in recognition of the Puyallup Tribes Treaty fishing rights battles that took place on the river the original steel used to cross. The truss work is gone. The name, at least, is honest about whose river it is. 15. Satsop River, Railroad Bridge, Grays, Harbor County. The Simpson Logging Company's railroad network covered the southern Olympic Peninsula and Grays Harbor lowlands for over a century. At its peak, the largest privately owned logging railroad still operating in the continental United States. When it converted to truck-based hauling in the 1950s, it left behind structures scattered across private timberland. The Satsop River Bridge was built in the 1920s to move timber across the middle fork of the Satsop. Timber construction, wooden pilings, logging cars loaded with old growth, part of a system that fed a regional economy built on the premise that there was enough old growth to last indefinitely. There wasn't. The bridge was abandoned in the 1950s. It remains on private land in Grays Harbor County, slowly returning to the forest around it, on no public trail and no heritage register. The trees it helped harvest are gone. The railroad that crossed it has been gone for 70 years. The bridge is still standing. 16. Baker River Bridge, near Concrete, Skagit County. In 1916, a concrete arch bridge was built over the Baker River on a highway through a town called Concrete, Washington. A town that existed because it sat on a limestone deposit ideal for manufacturing cement. The Superior Portland cement plant had opened there in 1905. The bridge was almost certainly built with its product. It is an open spandrel concrete arch. The roadway sits on slender concrete columns rising from the arch below. One of the oldest surviving concrete arch highway bridges in Washington, predating the WPA era concrete construction of the 1930s by 2 decades. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places May 4, 1976. It is still carrying State Route 20. The cement plant closed in 1968. The factory kilns are themselves now a local historic site. Most drivers crossing this bridge are on their way to the North Cascades or the Methow Valley. The arch drops below the highway grade. You would have to stop and look over the railing to see it. Nobody stops. There is no sign. The bridge has been there for 109 years, carrying cars to the mountains, with nothing to say what it is. Washington built bridges with genuine ambition. The first concrete pontoon bridge in the world, the first floating bridge in a saltwater tidal basin, a pair of world record railroad arches built simultaneously in the same county, and then it sank 3 of them, bypassed several others, lost one to an arsonist, and offered a structurally unique span to anyone who would take it for free and had no takers. The structures time forgot are not forgotten because they were unimportant. They are forgotten because time moved on, traffic moved on, money moved on, and the structures stayed. Some are still useful. Some are on the bottom of bodies of water. One is being demolished right now for a trail marker. Washington keeps building. It is less consistent about remembering what it built.